Welcome to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast, your weekly news roundup of hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories from around the Gem State. Hosted by Fish and Game's Public Information Specialist, Connor J. Lease.
And welcome back to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. Lots to cover today, but before we dive into this week's news, a brand new episode of Shooting the Bull is now out on the streets. Back in January, I buzzed on up to Coeur d'Alene and sat down with Carson Watkins and TJ Ross to learn everything there is to know about running hounds and treeing lions. Carson, aside from being the Panhandle Regional Supervisor, is an expert houndsman and an all-around great guy. He not only graciously sat down with TJ and I to record a podcast, but actually took us out on our very first mountain lion hunt, along with his two beloved hounds, Bess and Blue. Shout out Bess and Blue. Man, was that such an eye-opener. If you've ever been curious about hound hunting, wondered how it works, how the dogs work, how mountain lions go about their normal day, what happens when you get one in a tree, all that stuff, go check out episode 15 of Shooting the Bull, out now. This week, we got another Idaho State record fish popping up in North Idaho, plus an upcoming commission meeting and a reminder about shed hunting ethics. But first, here's a quick look at how the state's mule deer fawns and elk calves have fared so far this winter. Statewide winter survival for mule deer fawns and elk calves fitted with tracking collars has shown to be higher than average through the end of February. Here's deer and elk coordinator Toby Bedreau.
Right now, as of mid-March, things are looking promising for both deer and elk. We'll know for sure what survival will look like in the coming month and a half after we've tallied up the final numbers. But this is exactly what we're hoping for. Back-to-back mild winters to help get herd numbers, specifically in the southeast region, back on track.
To monitor herds, our biologists in early winter captured and collared 188 mule deer fawns and 75 elk calves across 14 different units to track their survival over winter. Winter survival is typically the biggest single factor affecting mule deer herds, and the long-term average is about 60% of fawns surviving their first winter. But that percentage can drop significantly during hard winters. By the end of February of 2026, 89% of collared fawns and 99% of collared calves were still alive. This year's winter, if you can even call it that, has been one of the mildest winters in decades, which may be bad news if you're a skier or a dried-out lodgepole pine in the month of July, but if you're a deer or elk, it's easy street, at least for now. Depending on weather, March and April are often when fawn and calf mortality reaches its peak because the young animals' fat reserves are largely depleted and their digestive systems need time to convert to digesting fresh green forage. While many people associate a quote-unquote hard winter with deep snow and frigid temperatures, spring weather is also critical to survival. For mule deer fawns in particular, a stretch of cold, wet weather in the early spring can substantially drop survival, and biologists can see winter-related mortality as late as May. So while things are tracking well, it's no guarantee the current crop of fawns and calves will continue on their current trajectory. Fawn and calf survival is critical to growing herds or sustaining current populations. Survival of young mule deer has a direct relation to the fall deer harvest because yearling bucks typically make up a significant portion of the overall mule deer harvest. In addition to that, knowing how many collared animals die each winter gives our wildlife biologists a good estimate of how the rest of the population is faring. And knowing just how many animals, in this case deer and elk, are out on the landscape is crucial when it comes to setting seasons and providing hunting opportunities. For more information on this topic and other deer and elk information, go check out our State of Deer and Elk webpage and our YouTube series. We've put together a robust series of 12 videos that highlight everything you've ever wanted to know about deer and elk, including why surveying matters, to why and when Fish and Game steps in to feed wintering herds, a whole bunch more. Link for that down in the show notes. All right, while we're on the subject of deer and elk, here's an important reminder that just because snow has melted, or whatever snow there was, doesn't mean that winter is over for elk and deer. On February 2nd, Puxatawny Phil, aka the fuzzy little varmint that Miraculously forecast the winter-spring transition on Groundhog's Day indicated there would be 6 more weeks of winter this year, if you can really call the previous 3 months winter at all. The bigger takeaway from Mr. Phil, though, is an important reminder that winter is not over for wintering deer and elk, so keep that in mind before you start shed hunting. Shed hunting is a popular activity and an exciting remedy for cabin fever. Armed with nothing more than a good set of eyes, looking for a deer or elk's shed antlers in late winter and early spring is a highly accessible hobby for those squirming like bird dogs for the next outdoor adventure. Shed hunting is accessible for all types of folks: hunters, non-hunters, youngsters, etc. You can bring your friends, your family, enjoy a day outdoors, and maybe even come home with a natural prize. But unlike other hunting seasons, there aren't typically set open and close dates or bag limits unless the Fish and Game Commission chooses to close a portion of the state due to severe winters. Being respectful of wintering wildlife is part of that sport. Chances are, if it feels too early to start shed hunting, it probably is. Wintering big game animals are very susceptible to any kind of disturbance, whether it is from passing motorists, domestic dogs, or shed hunters in late winter and early spring. There's growing concern over shed hunters putting additional stress on wintering big game in many areas of the state. Chalking up a winter season as mild, or in the case of this year, non-existent, is no excuse to hit the hills earlier either. Deer and elk still rely on fat reserves to get through winter, mild or not, and with nutrient-dense spring vegetation still weeks away, bumping deer and elk off their winter ranges while looking for sheds can have potentially lethal effects. Deer and elk are often found in small and large herds at lower elevations. Many will be loafing around or eating, and it's important that they be allowed to rest undisturbed. It's no secret that deer and elk spook easily. When one whiffs a human wandering through their winter range, their instinct takes over to head off for the next safe drainage, which can deplete their energy stores, especially if those disturbances are constantly repeated by the next person or the next group of people. Shed hunters are often big game hunters themselves, myself included, and responsible ones recognize that not pressuring deer and elk in winter is not only the respectful thing to do, but it also increases that herd's chances of carrying over more animals into the spring, summer, and then hunting season in the fall. Secondly, make sure you respect private lands and follow all road and area restrictions. Like all hunters, shed hunters should check with a landowner before venturing onto their property in search of antlers. The same goes for motorized vehicles. Certain public lands, including Fish and Game's wildlife management areas, are often closed to unauthorized motorized vehicle traffic and can only be accessed by foot or on horseback. In addition, even if motorized access is allowed on designated roads and trails, shed hunters should also seriously consider the potential impact to wildlife and the damage they may cause to roads and trails when the ground is wet. Keep in mind that just because you can drive somewhere doesn't mean you should. For questions about travel management plans or areas protected, contact your local U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, or Fish and Game Regional Office. Third important thing to note here, if you're bringing your dog along, be sure to control it, or maybe even better yet, just leave it at home. You may have trained Rover to ignore deer and elk, but that's no reason to let your pooch run hog wild through the foothills. If deer and elk can sense a human tiptoeing through the sagebrush a half mile away, they can definitely sense a bounding Labrador Retriever with a jangling collar. And they're likely to see all canines as predators, so in their eyes, your friendly, harmless dog is no different than a coyote or a wolf seeking its next meal. If you're shed hunting with your dog, remember, keep it close, under control, and if you see big game animals, head elsewhere. Now, glassing for sheds and wildlife from a hilltop can be a useful tool in a shed hunter's toolkit. Using a spotting scope or even just some binoculars can save a person a bunch of time and energy combing the hillsides with your eyes instead of your thighs. Modern optics can be your friend for shed hunting just like they can when you are normal hunting. You can use them to spot shed antlers from a distance, but you can also use them to spot faraway herds and know to avoid those areas, at least for the time being. When the animals have moved on, you can go and look for sheds. Also, remember that during winter, the bucks, and by association, their antlers, typically aren't hanging around the does, which tend to be down at lower elevations. Utilizing optics to find far-off bucks or bulls up at higher elevations can be a good strategy for shed hunters scouting locations where antlers might drop later, come later in the season. For mule deer, that means around December and January, and for bull elk, that's roughly March and into April. Lastly, a reminder that folks who come from out of state to look for antlers in Idaho need to have a hunting license. This new rule went into effect on July 1st back in 2024. The goal here is to protect wintering wildlife by reducing overcrowding on the hill among shed hunters, especially those occasions when neighboring states enact their own shed hunt closures. When neighboring states have an emergency closure, that action can often drive shed hunters to other states, like Idaho, where shed hunting may still be open, as was the case during the severe winter of 2022 and 2023. An influx of extra people on the landscape can make wintering wildlife even more vulnerable to increased disturbance, and that's true even during an average winter. If you do know a non-resident who enjoys shed hunting in Idaho, please give them a gentle reminder of the license requirement. And also, please be sure to check Fish and Game's website and social media channels for information about future antler gathering closures. It's not complicated, folks. Next time you're out hiking around or hunting for antlers, if you see wintering wildlife, just find another route. Blast the hillsides from the trailhead or look for recent signs like fresh hoof prints or scat on the ground. Chances are, if you're seeing does and cows, you're in the wrong area anyways. Be patient. Those higher elevation sheds will still be there later in the season. So trust your gut, sharpen those eyes, and avoid putting stress on wintering deer and elk. That's all I got. You can read the story on the website if you wish. Just hit the link down in the show notes. Alrighty, we got another Idaho State fish record to chat about. Let's dive in. Idaho's deepest lake, Lake Pend Oreille, no doubt possesses some aquatic beasts of mythical proportion. At a maximum depth of 1,158 feet and 43 miles from tip to glacially carved tip, that's a lot of deep blue space for a monster fish to hide. Imagine then the wave of hysteria after reeling in a 27-inch long West Slope cutthroat trout one day. Well, for Coeur d'Alene angler Kyle Hatrock, that day was February 1st. And as if a 27-inch cutty wasn't impressive enough, the fish, upon being measured, earned Hatrock a place in the Idaho State record books. Quote, "We just got all the lines out when not 10 minutes later, one pole starts singing out the line," Hatrock said. Quote, "The first run took about 450 feet plus for about 15 to 20 minutes, and as soon as it hit the net, my friend started freaking out saying, 'That's the biggest frickin' cutty I've ever seen,'" end quote. He and his buddies immediately put the tape measure to it. Hatrock's trout officially edged out the previous record, Daniel Whitesit's Clark Fork River West Slope cutthroat trout, by 2 inches. The new record fish, caught from the lake and not from one of its tributaries, is an exceptionally large specimen for a West Slope cutthroat trout, which rarely surpassed 20 inches, let alone 27. This continues to reinforce Lake Pend Oreille's reputation as Idaho's top trophy trout fishery. Thinking about chasing a state record fish for yourself? Well, you can check out the State Record Fish webpage for more information, linked down in the show notes. And as a bonus, if you are a native trout enthusiast looking for a new fishing challenge this year, don't forget that Idaho participates in the Western Native Trout Challenge, the biggest quote-unquote trout slam program around. So catch native trout, win prizes, and support trout conservation. That's all I got on that. In other news, Fish and Game biologists recently confirmed white nose syndrome found in Idaho bats for the first time. Here's more on that story. Idaho Fish and Game has received laboratory confirmation from the U.S. Geological Survey National Wildlife Health Center that 3 bats collected in North Idaho have tested positive for white nose syndrome, the first cases of the disease in Idaho bats. Fish and Game asks the public to avoid disturbing roosting bats and to report bat die-offs, especially if 5 or more bats are found dead or sick in one location within a short time. Do not handle bats and make sure you keep children and pets away from them. White nose syndrome does not pose a risk to humans, pets, livestock, or other wildlife, but it is a major threat to the bat population. You can report bat observations online or by contacting a Fish and Game regional office. Link for the reporting site can be found down in this episode's show notes. Fish and Game is also interested in reports of increased bat activity in areas where bats have not previously been observed, which can help biologists identify important habitats. A little brown myotis and a long-eared myotis, also known as western long-eared bat, collected in 2025 from Bonner County, and one bat collected in 2026 from Kootenai County tested positive for white nose syndrome. The Kootenai County bat is still awaiting final species confirmation. In addition, 2 Californian myotis bats found in Kootenai and Clearwater counties in 2025 tested positive for the fungus that causes white nose syndrome. Pseudogymnoascus destructans. Reed's going to kill me for butchering that. We'll just call it PD for short. These detections mark the first record of the fungus in both counties and occurred prior to the confirmation of white nose syndrome in Kootenai County in 2026. It's important to understand that not all bats with the fungus on them get sick. Several bat species have been found with PD but have not been affected. For those that do get sick, scientists confirm white nose syndrome by looking at the bat's skin under a microscope. Previous detections of PD in Idaho include 6 bats representing 3 species: little brown myotis, long-legged myotis, and Yuma myotis, swabbed at the Minnetonka Cave in Bear Lake County in October 2021, marking the first confirmed detection of the fungus in the state. Additional detections were later documented in bats collected from a silver-haired bat in Power County in 2024 and Bonner County in 2025 from a presumed Yuma myotis. None of these bats showed any signs of the disease, and no additional detections of PD have been documented at Minnetonka Cave since the initial confirmation. White nose syndrome affects hibernating bats and has killed millions of bats in North America since it was first detected in 2006. The fungus is most commonly spread through bat-to-bat contact, but it can also be spread by humans via contaminated clothing, footwear, or equipment. This is a big deal. Bats provide important ecological and agricultural benefits by consuming insect pests. A 2011 study estimated bats provide about $313 million annually in pest control benefits to Idaho agriculture. Fish and Game is monitored for white nose syndrome and the fungus that causes it through surveys, bat trapping, and public reports since 2009. The department is also evaluating management tools, including vaccination, to help reduce impacts to bat populations. For more on this story, hit the link in the show notes to read Wildlife Natural Resource Program Coordinator Dr. Rita Dixon's press release on our website. All right, moving on to our last story this week. Fish and Game is reminding the public that winter ticks on moose are normal. Boy, this one was hard to boil down for the podcast. Why TJ Ross had to put the most skin-crawling, zoomed-in shot of like 50 ticks on a dime-sized patch of moose hide right at the top of the story beats me. TJ, if you're listening to this, I'm going to find whatever it is that haunts your dreams and stick a large printout of it in your office next time I'm in Coeur d'Alene. Anyway, I digress. The real reason for this tick tantrum is because Fish and Game's Panhandle region has recently received several reports of moose that appear to have mange-like conditions or are exhibiting sickly behavior. In most cases, the cause is moose ticks, also known as winter ticks. Moose typically begin accumulating heavy tick loads in mid-September. The effects of those tick loads often becomes more noticeable during winter as moose scratch, paw, and rub against objects to relieve the irritation. This behavior can cause patches of hair to come off, leaving the animals with bald spots that may make them appear unhealthy. Seeing moose in this condition is understandably concerning. Although winter ticks are a natural part of the ecosystem, the issue appears to have worsened in recent years, likely due to shorter winters that allow more ticks to survive and reproduce. While many adult moose can tolerate heavy tick loads, calves are more vulnerable and may suffer blood loss, difficulty regulating body temperature, and poor overall body condition. Unfortunately, there is nothing Fish and Game can do to control the number of ticks individual moose carry or the abundance of winter ticks in the environment. If you see or encounter a moose, though, whether it appears healthy or has hair loss, please remember the following safety tips. Never approach or attempt to touch a moose. Keep your distance. Moose are predictable and may charge if they feel threatened. Keep pets on a leash to avoid provoking a defensive reaction. Be especially cautious around cows with calves as they are protective of their young. And never feed a moose or any other wild animal. Wildlife that becomes accustomed to human-provided food can pose serious safety risks. In situations involving human-wildlife interactions, we are always going to prioritize public safety. Our department also prefers to allow wildlife to leave urban areas and return to natural habitats on their own whenever possible. If public safety is at risk, our staff will intervene, which can include lethally removing the animal posing the threat. In rare circumstances, relocation may be considered if it can be done safely and without increasing risks to the public. For more information or questions, please contact the Panhandle Regional Office at 208-769-1414. And if you live in that neck of the woods, make sure you're following the Panhandle Region's Facebook page for updates and regional news. That's all I got for top stories. Let's hit the Rapid Fire Bulletin. Tune in next week for the March Commission meeting in Boise on March 24th and 25th. A public hearing will begin on March 24th at 7 p.m. at the same location. Those wishing to speak to the Commission during the public hearing will have a 3-minute time limit with additional comments accepted in writing. The business meeting will resume at 8 a.m. on March 25th at the same location. Public comments are not accepted during the business meeting, but it is open to the public and available via Zoom. The Edson Fichter Nature Area in Pocatello is in need of volunteers to help with basic maintenance tasks to keep it beautiful, accessible, and safe for its visitors. We're encouraging all businesses, clubs, organizations, and other groups to consider adopting a Wednesday service day during which your employees or members can assist with weeding, mowing, litter pickup, pruning, planting, mulching, and other tasks. Contact Volunteer Services Coordinator Tessa Atwood at the Southeast Region Fish and Game Office at 208-232-4703 to learn more. To keep fish from getting stranded in irrigation ditches, irrigators who divert water from rivers and streams in the salmon region are asked to contact Fish and Game's anadromous fish screen program at 208-756-6022 at least 1 week prior to turning on their water. This will allow Fish and Game to get any fish screens in the ditch prepared and operational before irrigation water is needed. That's all the news we have for this week. Thanks for putting an ear to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin. If there's something on your mind or you got a question related to Fish and Game matters, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Again, that's podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll catch you next week.